Some of you might know that about 4.5 years ago, my son, Malan Caleb Roos, passed away in his sleep. He was, as far as we knew, a perfectly healthy, 6-week-old, beautiful little boy. He died of SIDS, sudden infant death syndrome. In short, doctors just don't know why. It was shocking. It was gut punching. It was devastating, and it was and at times still is such a loss. I remember in those first few days how I struggled with this loss. Not so much the loss of Malan, but to be honest, the loss of sharing life with him, the loss of never having the opportunity to run around with him or never being able to throw a ball with him, the loss of never being able to teach him how to ride a bike, proper mountain bike, none of this stupid road bike stuff. And on his memorial service, an older pastor in our previous church network named Rick Moser did the sermon. He did such a great job that I can't remember a word he said, except for this one illustration that he used. And he had a piece of rope with him on stage, like this one. And the one end in his hand he held, and the other disappeared behind stage. You couldn't see the end. Now, this front part represents our life on earth. But that endless rope represents our lives running into eternity. There's no end to that. And for me, before that rope illustration, it was all about the loss of my boy Malan. My mind was consumed with temporal thinking. But for a God that sees our lives running into eternity forever and ever without stop, how long or short this beginning part is, I don't know, it probably doesn't really matter as much as we think. And this illustration of the rope in the weeks following that memorial service started to change how I pictured Malan. God came and restored hope for a future where Malan was very much part of my life. Now, I haven't seen heaven. I'm not as lucky probably as Heidi. But I imagine we will do some proper mountain biking together. This ties in so beautiful with the scripture that Yuri mentioned last week in Ecclesiastes. It says, He has made everything beautiful in its time. And listen to this. He has also set eternity in the human heart. And this morning I pray that God would set eternity in your heart. Job 14 verse 5 says God decides the length of our lives. So each of us is only given a certain amount of time. It's already been allocated by God. And it raises the question, what is it that we should spend this allocated time on earth on? In Mark 12 verse 28, there's one of the teachers of the law that seemingly wondered about this very same thing. What should he spend his life on? What are the important things? And when he saw that Jesus was full of wisdom, he asked him, of all the commandments, which is the most important? He's saying, of all the things God commands us on earth, in our allocated time, to best set us up for eternity, what is the most important? And here is Jesus' answer. The most important one, answered Jesus, is this: love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind, and with all your strength. The second is this. Some translation says equal to this: love your neighbor as yourself. There is no commandment greater than these. Now, you've probably heard this prioritizing of the law. There is no commandment greater than these. But there's an interesting exchange between Jesus and the teacher of the law that happens right after this, that we only read about in the account of Mark. This teacher of the law replies, he says, well said, teacher, the man replied. You are right in saying that God is one, and there is no other but him. To love him with all your heart, with all your understanding, with all your strength, and to love your neighbor as yourself. Listen to this. It is more important than all burnt offerings and sacrifices. It's more important than all burnt offerings and sacrifices. This teacher of the law gets it. In our context, we can probably say that loving God, loving others is probably more important than church attendance, probably more important than tithing, probably more important than volunteering or whatever else that you do to prove your loyalty to God. When Jesus saw that he had answered wisely, he said to him, "You are not far from the kingdom of God." You are not far from the kingdom. Now, this word kingdom is the word basileia, a realm that is ruled by a king. And you can find it a few places, but the robber that's next to Jesus on the cross, just before Jesus dies, used the same word. He says, "Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom." Same word, when you come into your basileia. He's using it with an eternal context. You see, this teacher of the law that has this exchange with Jesus, he didn't get that Jesus was the Messiah. But Jesus is telling him that he is spot on regarding the principles of the kingdom, the principles of the basileia, the principles of eternity. Loving God, loving others. Something that many NDEers report is that there is a life review in heaven. A moment between this life and the rest of eternity, right here, where life is reviewed, almost like a film of their entire life with nothing hidden. Now, I don't know about you, but that scares the living daylights out of me. But they all say that there is no judgment in this. Somehow the judgment was taken away. And this life review, even though very emotional, is covered in such love that it wasn't difficult to bear. Howard Storm is an NDEer that tells the story of his life review. He died from complications after his stomach perforated. Let's quickly look at this video and see what Howard says.
And in the life review, mine was not, as some people describe, panoramic, instantaneous. Mine was chronological from when I was born up to the present, moment by moment, life by life. I mean, not the sleeping parts, the awake parts, in detail, including knowing, experiencing the feelings of the people that I was interacting with. The whole emphasis was on people and not on things. Matter of fact, there were some instances where I had won promotions, honors, awards, and they skipped them. And Jesus, I said to Jesus, "You're skipping the most important thing in my life. This is what I live for, to get this award, Kentucky Artist of the Year, big banquet in my honor and a big cash prize and everything." And he said, "That's not what we're here for you to see. That's not important. What I want you to see is how you treated the students." So what I learned in my life review was that the relationship with my father, I had participated in the breakdown of that relationship as much as he did. He was not a good father to me, and I resented it, and I was angry at him. So I did everything I could, subconsciously and sometimes consciously, to be as rebellious and as cold-hearted towards him as possible, which only aggravated him more and made him more of a hostile father. So the things that I had seen in my life that where I was the victim and everybody else was the bad guy, I came to find out it was a two-way street. A bad scene was when Homer Fields, real nice art student of mine from Kentucky, came into my office to tell me about the breakup of him and his girlfriend. And I sat there at my desk pretending to listen. And in my mind, I was thinking, they don't pay me enough at this university to put up with this nonsense. I'm not here to listen to the whining of some 18-year-old boy about his, romantic failures. When is he leaving? That's what I'm thinking. And he's like, he's pouring his heart out. He's crying in my office about how this girl has broken his heart, and apparently thought I was a kind enough person to give all this to lay it out to me in the privacy of my office. And instead, I was, just get out of here. Leave me alone. I saw scenes where my sister was in bed crying, and I got up in the middle of the night and went in and put my arms around her and hugged her. And Jesus and the angels were so filled with joy that I had been willing to do that. I was created to be a loving person. That's what God wants, and I've been working on it. I thought that would be so simple when I came back, and it's turned out to be real interesting work that I am far from very good at, but much better than I used to be. And I know there's still people that think I'm a jerk, and that's okay too. I asked him that exact question. If I come back into this world, during the near-death experience, if I come back, what will be my purpose? And before he had a chance to answer, I said, I'm an artist. I'm going to build you a huge shrine. And he said, please don't do that. And I was like, but I'm an artist. That's what I do, it'll be great. It'll be crazy. It'll be wonderful. People will come from all over the world. He said, I don't need it. And I said, what do you mean you don't need it? There's all kinds of shrines and cathedrals built to you. And he said, yeah, well, they're not for me. They're for people. He said, I have a purpose for you. And I said, okay, come on, let's go. And he said, your purpose is to love the person that you're with. And I said, yeah, okay, great. I got that. What do you want me to do? And he said, no, that's it. And I said, that's it? Love the person I'm with? That's what you want me to do? And he said, that's your whole purpose. And I said, what good will that do? And he said, it'll change the whole world.
I love this video of Howard. And just so that you know, in 2 weeks, we are going to have Howard Storm, not Howard Stark, Howard Storm, in our Sunday service. So I'm so looking forward to that. But just out of this video, there will come a day or a time, right here, if time is relevant, where your life will be reviewed. And I don't know how much time is behind you. I don't know. I know you can't do anything to change that. But there's still a measure of time ahead of you on this earth. And you can change that. You can decide what that looks like. And you can fill it with moments where you care, where you support, where you comfort, where you help, where you love. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, and with all your strength. The second is this: love your neighbor as yourself. There's no commandment greater than these. Let's close our eyes in prayer. Lord, I want to thank you for your goodness. I want to thank you, Lord, that the principles of your kingdom, your basileia, you've laid out for us, Lord. And it's not complicated. It's simple. And I pray, God, that you would come and stir us, Lord, to pick up that mandate which you've given us, Lord. That we would love unconditionally as you love us. May this change the way, Lord, that we interact. May it change the way that we interact with our wives and husbands, with our kids, with our parents, with our neighbors, with our colleagues. May your love truly transform us. May your love truly transform every person listening now. Amen. Amen. Yuri, back to you.
Thank you, JP, and may eternity truly change the way we live. I've so enjoyed this week getting to hear more of Heidi's story. If you haven't clicked on the app or gone on the link on the text message that we sent out yesterday, or watched it on Facebook, please be sure to watch on the YouTube channel, Facebook channel, app, somewhere, the story of Heidi Barr's life. But it's great to have Heidi with us today, and I've asked Craig Parks if he would do the interview with Heidi today, as we are so excited to hear from you in person today about your great story, Heidi. Thank you for being with 512 City Church, and Craig, thank you for doing the interview for us.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Yuri. It's a real honor to get to do this. I've been involved in filming all the videos and content for What's After ATX campaign citywide for several months with a bunch of great filmmakers here in Austin. And there was one particular day that we were setting up to do a 12-hour shoot. And we were going to interview a bunch of people we had never met before, NDEers. Near-death experience individuals. And one of those that really stood out to me that day was Heidi Bars. Heidi is an amazing person. She's actually joining us from Bozeman, Montana this morning.
Yes. Good morning.
So thrilled to have you. As Yuri mentioned, your video, your piece is out there. We want everybody to see it. A lot of people have already seen it, but I wanted to start with I think it's important for people to get kind of a level set. You were 16 years old when you had your horseback accident, but tell us a little bit about your life before that. Set the stage for us so we understand how you were raised, your family, your sisters. Tell us a little bit about that first.
I was raised in a Jewish family. My father's an atheist to this day. My mother is an agnostic. At best, she's kind of has no concept of God whatsoever. I have two younger sisters, and oddly enough, I was raised Orthodox, even though my father had no belief in God. And he used to brag about the fact that he could be Jewish and not believe in God. So it was, I think I've mentioned he had a mantra, which was, and I know this might sound offensive, but this was his mantra: Jesus Christ is the greatest hoax ever perpetrated on mankind. That there is no God, there's no heaven, there's no hell. When you die, you're buried, the worms eat you. That your life has less significance than the smallest speck of dust in the universe. So that's what we grew up with, and it was a difficult, for a lot of reasons, it was a difficult childhood for all three of us.
So let's fast forward to age 16. Tell us about that day. You were horseback riding. Your sisters were watching.
Yeah, it was actually in April, happened in April in the spring. I had driven out to the ranch where we boarded my horse, and my little sister she always got out of the car. She played with the miniature horses. My middle sister was allergic to horses, so she stayed in the car. And that day I was riding alone. Normally a friend rode with me. So I got my horse out. There was commotion in the barn when I left because a man and his wife were fighting over who was going to ride the Arabian, very unpleasant Arabian. And I just took my horse and went off. And I didn't have a saddle. I rode bareback, which is probably what saved my life. If I had had a saddle, I would have died for real, for sure. And I was out riding for about an hour, and I decided I'd better head back because my sisters were probably pretty bored. So I headed back towards the barn, and I stopped on a ridge trail, kind of a hill above the barn, and up towards the back of the barn. And as I was sitting there on my horse, just enjoying the day, I could hear hoofbeats, out of control hoofbeats behind me. And I looked and saw that I actually figured it was the Arabian. And I saw that the guy was flapping on her back. He had dropped the reins, and she was heading, I thought, towards the barn. But at the last minute, she turned and headed towards my horse. And I didn't know what to do. I really didn't know what to do. I thought, if I get off, she's going to smash me. She's going to run into me. I thought I was safe as staying on my horse. And I thought when she saw my horse standing there calmly, she would stop. She didn't. She ran into my horse. My horse reared up. First time she reared up, I dropped the reins, grabbed her mane, and held on. Second time she reared up, she stepped off the edge of the trail with her back feet, flipped head over heels, falling across my body, breaking my pelvis, breaking my back, and crushing my chest. And it was when she crushed my chest that I died. So
then what happened next? You leave. You see.
I left immediately. The minute she crushed my chest, I left my body and floated maybe 30, 40 feet up in the air. I could see everything happening below me. I could see everything happening down at the barn. I could see everything happening with my sisters. And the interesting takeaway for me was I watched the horse roll over my body. And as I keep saying, my body was flipped like a rag doll. I could see that, and I didn't care. I had no interest in my body. It was meaningless to me. I had no interest in what happened to that body on the ground. I watched the horse right herself, skid down the hill and run toward the barn. I saw my little sister, who could see everything, scream and cover her face with her hands. I saw my middle sister with her face pressed against the window of the car. I saw the Arabian take off with the man and run down to the barn. I saw my horse skid down the hill and run down to the barn. I saw the commotion in the barn. I saw lots of screaming and yelling, and I saw Charlie realize that my horse, that I was probably somewhere. He didn't know where, but my horse was there without me. And the one thought I really had no interest in myself. But the one thought I had in that moment was, I wish my sisters didn't have to see me die. And when I said that to myself, when I felt that, that's when I began to notice Jesus, or a light. I began to notice a light shining over my shoulders. And even though it was a cloudy, blustery day, the light shining over my shoulders illuminated everything before me, like the sun, but brighter. And that's when I realized the light was coming from a man, and he moved forward. So we were standing together up in the air, and I knew immediately it was Jesus, which was really interesting because I didn't believe in Jesus. I did have a belief in God, oddly enough, but I didn't believe in Jesus. I didn't believe he existed. And I knew instantly that this was Jesus, without him telling me, without him saying a word. And I knew I had known him my entire life. I knew he had been with me since I was formed in my mother's womb. I knew he had been by my side. I knew he'd been there. And I instantly loved him. So keep asking questions and I'll keep answering.
Yeah, the other thing that you shared with us is you actually talked about sitting in Christ's lap and embracing you. Share that with everybody.
Yes, but that was kind of after my life review, and once we got to heaven. Jesus and I surfed our way to heaven, which was pretty cool, and that's another long story. I did have a life review before we left, but as we approached heaven, basically everything I could differentiate individual things, but we began to go faster and faster, and ultimately we reached a barrier, and we did cross the barrier, and I knew we had crossed a barrier. And when we crossed that barrier, all things became one thing, and that one thing was God. And as we crossed the barrier and I recognized God, I could see a light. And this light was the most perfect white, blemishless light you can imagine. It took up my entire field of vision. It was infinite in its scope. It was alive, and it was love, and it was God. And Jesus took me directly into the light. We went directly into the light, where he and the light, and I can't really explain it, he and the light became one thing. And the next thing I knew, and I kind of think, and this is why JP's story really touched me, I kind of think when young people or children go to heaven, they go straight to God. Because the next thing I knew, I found myself sitting on God's lap. I don't know how that can happen, but it made sense at the time. And I wrapped my arms around God, and he wrapped his arms around me, and I buried my face in his chest, and I sat there and knew that I didn't want to leave. I would have stayed there forever. If somebody would have let me stay there forever, if God would have let me stay there forever on his lap, I would have stayed there forever on his lap. I would never have moved.
Well, that's a consistent story with everybody that's been interviewed. As in John Burke's book, is that nobody wanted to leave. It's hard to comprehend that. Really hard to comprehend that. But let's I want to move forward to you coming back. You didn't want to come back, but you're back. Tell us what life was like afterwards. Tell us how you used this, how it changed your life, your relationships, your priorities.
Well, I'm not going to say it was easy coming back. First of all, I didn't want to come back. And Jesus and I yelled at him that I didn't want to come back. He knew I didn't want to come back, and he made me come back. My life it wasn't easy for many years, and I struggled with a lot of different things, but I knew a few things. I knew, number one, there was not a single material thing in this world that mattered to me. What matters is love. What matters is how I treat other people. What matters is loving people and forming loving relationships and loving God. Those are the things that matter. You could take away any material possession I have, and I don't care. And I feel very blessed because I have a wonderful husband. I have 3 wonderful kids. I have 2 amazing grandkids. And those are the important things. That's what matters to me. Sure, money's great. It helps a lot, but money doesn't matter. If you have a catastrophe, if you're stuck in your house because of a virus, if you're in the midst of war, what matters is it still matters how you love God and how you treat people. Those are the things that matter. And, and I think in the moment that I died, I lost my fear of death. So I don't worry about that. I still have a father who's terrified every single moment of every single day of dying, an elderly father. So he can't live his life. He has been paralyzed his entire life because he's so terrified of death. And that's not to say I'm not afraid of things. Like my youngest daughter skydives, and she wants me to do it. And I don't think I can jump out of an airplane. It's not a fear of death. I can't jump out of an airplane. So, but I lost that fear, and I was able to live in the now. I was able to simply live my life and deal with what happens now, not deal with projections, not think I'm going to sit around and worry what's going to happen 20 years from now. I'm going to just deal with the now, what I have to deal with right now. And I found that I was able to forgive other people, forgive myself. That doesn't mean I'm perfect. Believe me, I am not perfect. I have a temper. I get impatient. But as Howard Storm said, it's a work in progress. I don't expect perfection, because the one thing I got from God was, if we were perfect, we wouldn't need him. He doesn't expect perfection, but he expects us to be good. So that's one of the things I learned, which is why I cut myself a little bit of slack. If I screw up, I just try to apologize, go back, redo it, make it better. I keep an awareness of the way I treat other people. I'm aware of that. Because I know I'm going to have to look at it again. Believe me, I know I will have to look at that again.
Absolutely. And maybe one more question, a couple more quick questions. I think it's important that people know that you dedicated your life to being a hospice nurse for 14 years. You've written a book about it. To talk about how your experience with heaven, you maybe were able to use that with all these probably hundreds of people that, have passed as a nurse.
Well, I never thought about being a nurse my entire life. That just did not occur to me. And then suddenly I found myself in my very early 20s wanting to be a nurse. And I originally worked in intensive care, coronary care, and I moved on to hospice. A lot of people have asked me, how do you handle that? Everybody dies. And yeah, everybody does die, but then everybody in life dies too. That's one of the things we all have in common as human beings, is we all die. And for the most part, I can't say these deaths didn't touch me, because if you read my book, every single death touched me one way or another. But I was able to handle it because I had already been there, and I felt like I could get them there too. I could be there by their side while they were making this transition, because I had experienced it myself. And the hospice nurses are a pretty interesting group anyway. We're really interesting, different kind of people. We're kind of at the other end. We're like midwives. We midwife people out of life the way a midwives a baby into life.
Yeah. So last question, I'd love to go on and on, but the last question is just how would you encourage, those that are watching today about their life, the importance of having a relationship with Christ, and maybe the people that are worried about the current situation that we're currently in? How would you just encourage us?
I think in terms of the current situation, the way I look at things is this too shall pass. We'll be all right. Not everyone, some tragedies will happen, but for the most part, this too shall pass. And I even look at the situation and say to myself, yeah, I could catch it. I could get really sick. I could die. I know that. But I am going to live my life anyway and accomplish what needs to be accomplished. In terms of a relationship with Jesus, he is always there. What I learned is he's always there waiting for a relationship with us, but it's our choice. The minute I saw him, I knew him and I loved him. And I actually don't know, because it wasn't my experience, what happens if you don't recognize him and decide not to love him. So I can't address that. I only knew that he was there giving me the opportunity to admit him into my life. So I think he's available to everybody. I think God is always there available to everybody, but God can't force us to love him. This is a choice. We have a choice in this world. We have choices. And I guess that's both the beauty and the tragedy in this world. We have choices. We can make good choices or we can make bad choices. And even though I won't make perfect choices in my life, I haven't, and I probably never will. I'm making the best choices I can based upon what I learned when I was dead. So,
well, thank you so much, Heidi. It's great to see you again, and thanks for being with us.
Good to see you.
So
Thank you.
Everybody knows. Very happy to have you here. Yuri, back to you.
Wow. Eternity matters. And what I love about your story, Heidi, is how what happened to you when you saw a glimpse of eternity, how it changed the way you lived your life, how it changed the way you saw what you saw as valuable and what was valuable and dear to you. I believe that our view of eternity matters, and we serve a God that is bigger than this, that is bigger than your circumstance, that is bigger than your challenge, that is bigger than your grief, that is bigger than your loss. And we get to worship him today as our way maker. We get to worship him today as the one that is ready to come and make a way in the midst of your circumstance, in the midst of your difficulty. And as Amy, it's great to have you with us again. Amy Hooper is an old friend of Fartile City Church. And Amy, as you lead us in the song, can I encourage you to worship God as our way maker? He made a way for Heidi. He's still making a way for Heidi. He made a way for us to be together. He made a way for us to worship him in the midst of this. And let's take a moment as we allow this song to minister to us, to respond to God as our way maker. And maybe you're on the stream today and you've never embraced him as your way maker to heaven, your way maker to a life that is more than mere survival. Maybe today is your day. So as the song is sang over you, as you participate in the song, to respond and say, he is my way maker.